Hello, let me introduce myself. My name is Brian Sweeney. I'm the chairman of the board at Capernwray. But I'd like to welcome you to a place that I've been spending a great deal of time in the last few days and weeks, my home. In fact, as you probably guessed, you're now with me in my office. And I guess, like you, I've been spending these last strange and surreal couple of weeks in this, what can best be described as encouraged self-isolation, trying to find what to do with the time that we have available. Because even though I'm at home and I very much like being at home, I find it quite frustrating and not really knowing what best to do with the time available. In fact, it sounds a strange thing to say, but it's been killing time. But I guess also, like you, I've been wanting to find more meaningful things to do with my time. And I guess in this enforced time at home, and strangely with this unbelievably good weather that we've been having recently, I've found myself, probably like you, spending a lot more time in the garden. In fact, I've been spending so much time in the garden, it's never looked so good in all the time that we've lived here. I've been creosoting the fence, I've been creosoting the wooden garden furniture. In fact, if it doesn't move, it got creosoted. And I have to admit, I'm not really a DIYer by skill or by nature, by design or by desire. But I have found it useful to sort of make good use of the time, because I find it really quite difficult not to be dealing with the urgent stuff. I'm having to do with some of the important stuff, such as looking after the garden furniture, the sort of stuff that I would normally just not bother about at all. I always find it quite easy to find an excuse, or a good reason, I should say, not to do it. But in these strange and unusual times we find ourselves in now, that's exactly what I have been doing. And it's in the doing of that, for me, very strange experience of doing DIY in the garden, that I've had a really, really interesting experience that I'd like to share with you, if I may. Because that experience for me has been actually spending time having to wait for time. Let me explain what I mean by that. When you put a layer of paint on, and I sort of dab it on fairly haphazardly, and of course usually probably put more on than is necessary, but basically what I'm trying to say is that I'm having to wait for the paint to dry. And I guess, like you, that well-known phrase that we all know, waiting for paint to dry, is something that I've really got to know, maybe love a little bit, it'd be strange to say, in these last few days. Because it's been in the in-between periods that I've found this most enlightening experience that I've had. Because whilst I was waiting for paint to dry, that I had that really great personal, awakening to what the Bible in Psalm 46 described as, "Be still and know that I am God." Because I guess, like you, I don't find it very easy to be still. I usually am wanting to speed things along. I couldn't wait for the sun to do its job and really get that paint dry so I could get on with the second coat. But God had a different thing in mind for me while I was going through this really most bizarre experience. I had to literally wait and wait for the paint to dry. But I thought I'd do something with that time in between the coats of paint, as it were. So I looked into this verse in Psalm 46. As I say, it's "Be still and know that I am God," something that we all know very, very well. And I looked into both that verse and indeed the whole of that psalm in a bit more detail than I would normally do. And I found it fascinating what I discovered. So let me share with you briefly some of the things that I've found. "Be still and know that I am God," 46:10, Psalm 46:10. Because as the paint was still drying, I made use of the time to delve a little deeper into that verse. And what I discovered was, as the climax of Psalm 46, verse 10 is not so much about the meditation as it is about the mediation of God's kingdom in the heart of faith. The command to be still comes from the hifil stem of the verb rapha, meaning to be weak, to let go, to release, which might better be translated as cause yourself to let go or let yourself become weak. But to what extent are we to be still, to let go, to surrender? Well, in the Hebrew grammar, the emphasis of coordinate imperatives sounds a bit bizarre, but let me explain. Be still and know is the second imperative. In other words, we surrender in order to know that God is in control as Rabono Shel Olam, the master of the universe. We let go in order to objectively know the saving power of God in our lives. We give up trusting in ourselves and our own designs in order to experience the glory of God's all-sufficiency. And when we surrender to the sure truth that the Lord God of Israel is in complete control of this world, we will find peace and be delivered from our fears. Indeed, even though the present world be shaken, as it says in verse 2, with the nations raging and the kingdoms of men tottering, verse 6, we will not fear, since we know God is our present help in time of trouble, verse 1. How strange it is to read those words, to experience them in what's going on in our world today. We read these words in the Old Testament and we think, well, what must it have been like then? But boy, how true they are in today's terms. But it goes on. The city of God will one day be established upon the earth, and the schemes of the princes of this world, as they are referred to, will all become desolate, verses 8 and 9. But in the coming kingdom, the Lord Most High, El Elyon, will be exalted among the nations. This is the part of verse 10 that we don't usually read on to. And Yeshua will forever be exalted among his original covenant people, Israel. Powerful, powerful words. Well, you know, reading the complete psalm took all of about 60 seconds. But I can honestly say what an encouraging and enlightening time, and dare I say, an exciting time, to be reminded that our God, the God of Jacob, is indeed our fortress. And in these days, what a welcome thought, what a comforting thought, what a true statement it is that the God of Jacob is indeed our fortress. In these anxious times that we are living through, I've found it to be incredibly comforting and reassuring, this wonderful, wonderful psalm. And who would ever have thought that there could be so much joy and understanding achieved while experiencing watching paint dry?